I'm currently entering the town of Arco. And Arco is relevant to our theme of how transportation and communication development shape communities for a few different reasons. Firstly, like many small towns out in the Intermountain West, it grew up around a transit junction, in this case, the intersection of two stagecoach lines. And as a result, when the town applied for official status to the Postmaster General's office in Washington, D.C., they requested the town be called Junction. But the Postmaster General refused because Junction was too generic a name. Too many places called Junction. Instead, he asked that the town call itself Arco, after a German radio inventor who is currently visiting D.C. named Georg von Arco.
For a place to be built for stagecoaches and named for radio by the mail is quintessentially Western already, but Arco did even better by picking up and moving not just once, but twice in order to chase after transit infrastructure.
First it moved when the stagecoach stop was shifted, and then it moved again when a railroad came through the area. So originally the town's location was a few miles away from where it is now, near the Craters of the Moon National Monument, right at the end of the Lost River Valley. So, by reaching the town of Arco, I'm finally coming out of the fastness of the Idaho Rocky Mountains, returning to the Snake River Plain, and entering yet another new landscape.
It's a landscape known primarily for two things: lava fields and nuclear reactors. Idaho National Laboratory is one of the West's iconic military-industrial restricted areas. It's where people first used atomic energy to generate electricity, and the only fatal reactor accident in U.S. history happened on the other side of this fence.
I'm pretty used to the idea that as I'm walking down the side of the road, I'm visible, and everyone who drives past can look at me and scrutinize me and form an opinion of me without really meeting me or engaging with me in any way. But up until now, I haven't had to deal with the idea that I'm being watched. As long as I'm walking through this stretch of desert, I'm being watched. What goes on here is very secret, very expensive, and extremely dangerous. And as a result, if you put even a toe out of line, as a resident of Arco told me, security will jack you up. And I'm not looking for that to happen, so it was important to me that I try to get everything straightened out with relevant authorities before I set off down this stretch of highway. Because between Arco and Idaho Falls is a good 70 miles of high desert, about 25 or 30 miles of which seem to go through INL territory. And in that stretch, there's only one public rest stop. Everywhere else, if you deviate from the highway, they will come after you. Apparently, until just recently, coming after you included 2 Black Hawk helicopters armed with .50 caliber machine guns.
Before the atomic projects took over, this was a naval proving ground. The combination of what the military considered a suitably remote location and convenient transcontinental rail service made it a handy place to test heavy artillery and practice carpet bombing, and the lava fields are still littered with ordnance. Again, don't step off the road. All things considered, the oddest thing about this place today might be that there's a public road through it at all. In the 19th century, though, the path across these lava fields was one of the most important and symbolic transportation routes in the growing American empire.
Away to the north is the Lemhi Range. Lewis and Clark crossed those mountains further on by the present-day Montana border. Because they were looking for a water route through from the Great Plains to the Pacific coast, they'd followed the Missouri River all the way up to its headwaters and were trying to find a direct way from there to the Columbia River. As a result, they completely missed the Snake River Plain here. They were looking for a practicable water route, and as a result, they missed the only workable land route. It took a party of fur traders from the Astor Company to discover that a few years later, heading eastbound from Oregon. That later became the Oregon Trail. out in the wind all the time is stressful. Not so much in an emergency kind of way, it just wears away at you. It's hard to keep a steady train of thought going. It's hard to think creatively. I find myself sort of rehashing old ideas and going over conversations from hundreds of miles ago. It doesn't really help that one of the reasons it's so windy out here is that the landscape is comparatively featureless. About the most exciting thing going on here are the electrical lines and the occasional stack of hay bales. I'm looking forward to getting into town. I'm currently crossing the bridge that spans the falls on the Snake River. The town grew up here because of crossings over the river.
Idaho Falls is home to the TV broadcast station closest to the place where the first television was designed, by a high school student named Philo Farnsworth way back in the early 1920s. He had to go to San Francisco to actually build the machines, but at least in a notional sense, this corner of Idaho is where television came from. And in a literal sense, this building is where it comes from now, with the same weatherman presiding for the past 35 years.
My name's Steve Cannon. I am a meteorologist with KIDK TV3 and KIFI Local News 8. Research has shown us that the major reason people tune in to a local newscast is for the weather. In the old days, to show where the rain or snow is falling, we would have a facsimile recorder that used wet paper and static electricity to burn off an image. And those images came about every half hour. And we had to literally take that image off, take colored pencils or colored markers, show the shower activity, and then put it on a board with a static camera taking a picture of it for the on-air.
Yeah.
Well, now, of course, everything's real-time and satellite data. The ability to generate forecasts has changed markedly. You know, from 1 to 2 hours from when data was received by a processing center to when that forecast could be disseminated to the public. Well, a lot happens in 2 hours with the weather. And now we've got, again, almost instantaneous rendering of data to dissemination. I think there will always be those who, at the end of their day, at 5:30, 6, 9, 10 o'clock, want to sit down in their favorite chair, push the clicker, and have the newscast that they have been so used to. But I think with the high-speed social networking, all of the tools now that are available to get information on demand. If I want to know, if I'm traveling from Idaho Falls to Boise, and I want to know what I'm going to come up with as far as wind, clouds, temperatures, rain or snow, I want that now. We break into programming whenever there's a watch or a warning that can impact people's safety, their economics. If truck drivers hauling a semi-load of potatoes and there's 80-mile-an-hour winds and there's chances that semi is going to blow over, we're going to get on the social medias, or we're going to break into network programming as quickly as we can and get that word out. When I first started in the business, a live production was like trying to raise the Titanic. Now we have 3 or 4 newscasts. The satellite dishes are mounted on trucks. You can take them anywhere you want, aim them anywhere you want. In an emergency scenario, we can probably, once we arrive on scene, we can have a live shot in less than 5 minutes. Technology has changed so much. There was a time when I could direct, produce, edit the film, edit the copy, write the copy, and deliver the copy of a newscast. I can't do that now because of the way things have changed. For years, I was the local answer to Charles Kuralt. I would go out and do feature stories. I've traveled all over the United States. I've been to a good section of the world. And at all that time, I've never found anybody or anywhere I like more than here. People treat you like family. Everywhere I go, they stop me and they call me by name. And I've never met them. I don't consider myself a celebrity by any means, but I like the fact that people consider me their friend.
Is it pretty common for the people who work here to been long-time residents?
No. Oh, no. An awful lot of people will get experience in college, and then they'll come to this station or even a smaller market, and generally speaking, we'll have them for 2 years, and then they'll go to a larger market with the end goal in mind. Obviously, everybody wants to end up in either New York, or Los Angeles. I'm the exception because this is my home. My great-grandfather homesteaded near Rexburg, which is about 20 miles north, 2 years after George Custer found out he was not invincible. 1878, we've been here ever since. We still operate kind of by the code of the West out here. You know, the old John Wayne, life is hard. It's harder when you're stupid. Sometimes we are not as generous with newcomers. This chap was talking about, oh, I can't stand Idaho. It is so provincial. It is so backward. It is so behind. And finally, I looked at him and I says, well, if it's so bad, why are you here? You know, one of the most beautiful things in the world is somebody who's always griping about the area, turning south and driving back.
I wasn't heading south or driving. I was heading for the Tetons, where the national park had just been closed to the public as part of the federal government shutdown. On the way, I stopped by the Farnsworth TV and Pioneer Museum in Rigby and talked to the curator, Glenna Smith, about what it was like when television first came back to its own hometown.
I'd say TV came in here actually in 53, 54 roughly.
What did people think of it?
Well, they thought it was really something that you turned the TV on at 5 o'clock in the afternoon, watch the news and maybe one show and shut it off because that's all there was.
Did people know at the time this was Farnsworth's thing?
I didn't. I never really thought about him coming from here until we started seeing the signs out on the highway.
Yeah, right before television showed up. Did radio pretty much do everything that television did?
Okay. You just couldn't see it. I used to listen to a program out of Salt Lake every, well, I guess it was Saturday night. And it was called the Lux Radio Theater, and they broadcast movies, you know, the soundtracks of movies. And we always, when we got up in the morning, we'd turn on the radio, and we never had a radio till I was 12. We just never couldn't afford to buy one. We'd listen to the Grand Ole Opry from Chicago, and the news every morning. We always listened to the news out of Salt Lake because when we got the first radio, there wasn't even a broadcasting station here. During the Second World War, Tuesday nights, they had the Pathé News at the theater. The last week's war pictures and stuff. And I don't know how many people would come in the theater, pay their money to get in the door, come in the theater, sit down, watch that Pathé News and leave. They didn't care whether they watched the movie or not. They just wanted to see the news.
By what point did the television become a commonplace household appliance?
Oh, probably 65. You know, the little black and white sets weren't all that expensive.
What are some of the big memories that you have of things that you saw on television?
Ed Sullivan Show. That's the first thing I remember really watching on a regular basis.
What about news things?
When Mount St. Helens blew up and Yellowstone burning.
One of the volunteers at the Farnsworth Museum told me that when his family first got a television, they were living in a house way out in the countryside. One evening they were watching a Groucho Marx program, and his mother said, "I swear I can smell that Satan cigar." And the kids all said, "No, Mom, that's not how it works. With television you can see it, but you can't smell it." And then in the morning they woke up and they discovered the wood stove had burned a hole right through the flue and through one of the studs in the wall and then gone out, and they'd come that close to all being burned alive in their sleep. And that went down for him as an indelible memory of early television.